Welcome to the Rijksmuseum. My name is Bo and I'm your guide today. But first, take a good look around. But you cannot leave the Rijksmuseum without visiting the Gallery of Honor. It's called that way because here we have a selection of the greatest, best painters of the Dutch 17th century. Come and join me. Look, the Hall of Fame. But before we enter that, we take a good look first here in this festive hall. The Great Hall, so we call it. Look at the ceiling, all decorated. And look at these beautiful glass-stained windows where you see the development of the arts, also with Dutch artists. And on the walls, you see the glorification of the Dutch history. Everything is decorated from top to toe. Everything is designed by Pierre Cuypers, because he didn't only design the building, this whole building, but also all the decorations here inside. Cuypers believed that this was the ideal preparation for a fruitful museum visit. Come and join me to the Hall of Fame. Look at this inviting spread. Why, these cheeses, apples, nuts and olives all look real enough to eat. Equally realistic are the fragile Chinese porcelain and filled wine glass, with the tablecloth behind it shining through. Van Dyck was a pioneer in this genre and an expert at depicting all these different materials, or, as we say, textures. To heighten the sense of depth, he deliberately balanced the pewter plate on the edge of the table. And just look how the apple peel spirals down the side, as if it could slide off at any moment. Still lifes were popular in the 17th century, and not just for their technical brilliance. Often they also had a deeper significance. For instance, the juxtaposition of aged and young cheeses could symbolize the transience of life. However, these cheeses are all old, albeit differently colored. You can tell from their crumbly consistence. Cheese itself was associated with perishability. It's therefore likely that the 17th century viewers would have understood this lavish bread as an exhortation to temperance. Look at this little girl, the girl in blue, painted by Johannes Verspronck. How old is she? 8 or 10 maybe? We certainly can't tell from her clothes. In the 17th century, there were no children's clothes. Children were dressed as little adults. In keeping with the latest fashion, her dress features a double flat collar, trimmed in lace and gold thread. Her jewelry is also anything but childish, including pearls, golden earrings and a brooch. Perhaps her mother's? But what does her face tell us then? Do her large eyes and rosy blush hint at shyness or at melancholy? Or instead, is her direct gaze proud and perhaps even, if you look at the up-tilted corners of her mouth, a bit disdainful? We'll never know. And perhaps that's precisely why this is one of the most popular child's portraits of the 17th century. Her name is likewise a riddle. Not so the painter. He was Johannes Verspronck and a pupil of Frans Hals. Look, there she is, the famous milkmaid. So caught up in her chores that she doesn't even notice us. The incoming daylight is reflected everywhere in the room, but most strongly in the still life on the table and the milk jug in her hands. The stream of milk actually appears to be flowing. You can almost hear it. Vermeer achieved this magical effect by painting tiny dots of color to indicate spots where the light is reflected. Vermeer was a perfectionist, for whom even the smallest detail was significant, from the nails in the wall to the clutter on the floor. Clutter? Indeed, This may look like an immaculate household, but in fact the bare wall is damaged, one of the window panes is broken, and hunks of bread lie scattered around in the bread basket. We don't notice it at first because of the relaxed pose of the kitchen maid, and who at her work in a colourful dress diverts all attention from the sparse surroundings. She is the focal point in this sophisticated composition, a brightly lit beacon in the midst of a muted scene. The Merry family, totally different than Vermeer. This fun-loving family looks to be in a state of utter chaos. Young and old are all visible enjoying their fill of unrestrained smoking, drinking, music making. The slip of paper affirms this. It bears the text, "As the old sing, so the young pipe," which is to say, children will follow their parents' example. The father has clearly been over-imbibing. Mother and grandmother are belting out a duet, and the baby is literally being spoon-fed this lifestyle of excess. This out-of-control family gathering is intended as a negative example, cautioning us to never let things get this out of hand. Jan Steen expertly rendered the figure's effusive movements and facial expressions, which already distinguished him in his own day. Compare this to the dignified and calm poses of the figures in other 17th century paintings. Steen was a consummate storyteller and had no problem poking fun at himself. He often included himself in his own paintings. In this one, he's the figure blowing the bagpipes, an instrument that, in the 17th century, signified a fool. Look, the threatened swan, made by Jan Asselijn. If you've ever seen an angry swan, you'll know this painting isn't exaggerating. She's life-size and fearsome, partly because our view of her is from below. Wings heaved wide, feathers flying, beak squawking. The dog swimming up to the swan's nest from the left is sure to turn tail and flee. Look at this piece. You'd never guess that this was the only animal painting the artist ever made. Asselijn's true speciality was landscapes, suffused with warm Mediterranean light. Light is also important here, coming in from the background to illuminate the thundercloud and the swan's white coat of feathers. Around the wings, these appear almost translucent, deepening to bluish-grey where the sun does not reach. Jacob van Ruisdael, The Windmill at Wijk bij Duurstede. This is the Holland everyone knows. A windmill, water, and characteristically ominous clouds gathering overhead. Jacob van Ruisdael has turned it into a dramatic spectacle. The sky occupies 3/4 of the composition and is perfectly balanced by the landscape, and the windmill proudly towering over its surroundings. And then there is the light. Breaking through the clouds, it almost spotlights the windmill and picks out random passages of the landscape. It grazes the tops of the bushes and reflects off the orange roof tiles and the clothes of the 3 women in the right foreground. They signal a spot that was occupied by the so-called Women's Gate in real life. Ruisdael left it out of his painting as it would have detracted from the windmill. If you look closely, you can see the miller standing at the balustrade, as though he's checking the weather. Is there a storm coming in? The sailors don't seem to mind one way or the other. The Jewish Bride. This painting is suffused with quiet affection. The warm gazes and the tender way the hands touch. We have no trouble understanding the sentiment Rembrandt sought to convey. by leaving the background in shadow with only the outlines of some foliage, he focused all attention on the couple and most radiantly of all on their hands. The Jewish Bride is one of Rembrandt's best-loved works. In the 19th century, it was thought to depict a father and daughter preparing for a Jewish wedding, and the title given to the painting stuck. Who the subjects are in reality is a mystery, but most likely they were contemporaries who had Rembrandt paint their portraits in the guise of the biblical couple Isaac and Rebekah. Their clothing is anything but contemporary, however, and conforms to the type of exotic dress that Rembrandt imagined biblical people wore. A striking feature of this painting is the contrast between the subtle mood and bold manner in which Rembrandt rendered the clothing. This Hall of Fame is like the nave of a cathedral where we're all led to the altarpiece, the night watch. The question people often ask me is, why is this painting so world famous? Well, I tell you, Rembrandt is called the master of light. And how? Well, look for example at the captain's hand, how the light falls on the top of his hand and how shadow comes from right beneath his hand. This way, it gives him a lot of depth. It looks like it's coming right at you. The same is with the sword in the hand of the yellow officer. It's coming right through the canvas. All these spots of light gives this painting a lot of depth. And also how he portrays these men. They're not posing just next to each other like that, but they're all doing something. Right at the moment the captain said, "Okay, man, let's go," everybody is doing something. And right at that moment, Rembrandt made a picture in his head, an action picture. And that is precisely why Rembrandt is so different from all the rest.